I
can got it.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
Sorry about that, guys. This is my one of my first times using Zoom. So welcome. I'm glad everybody is participating today, and we're glad that you are here. This presentation is through the Community and Junior College Library section of ACRL. It is creating OER at the community college level. And we will introduce ourselves in just one moment, but there are a few things that we just want to make sure that we tell you about the presentation before we get started. Well, actually, we'll introduce ourselves next. My name is Jessica Cerny. I work at Trident Technical College in North Charleston, South Carolina. I am the OER librarian, and if you like, you can email me. It's presented on the screen. And Kristen?
Yes, my name is Kristen Cook, and I work at McLennan Community College in Waco, Texas. I am the coordinator of library research and instruction and helped start an OER cohort with faculty and staff here at MCC.
Excellent. Now, the agenda for today's presentation is we're going to do welcome introductions, which we already did. We're going to do a quick recap of OER, especially for those that might not have taken the previous sessions that we had, because this is the last one of the 4-part series that we had. And then we're going to be talking about creation, reuse, remix, authoring, hosting, and publishing. And then we're going to have a mini checklist of considerations to kind of get you thinking in that regard of what's the next step, what should I consider. Then we have slides that have resources about OER creation, conferences, professional development, stuff that we know as librarians we would love to see when we do or when we take webinars. So we're not going to leave you empty-handed when you leave today. And then we'll have a time for questions where you can post to the chat, or you can ask at the end of the presentation any questions, and we'll answer them and try to answer them to the best of our ability. And so, like I said, if you do have a question, we'll try to get to them during the presentation. If not, feel free to email us if you have that question, and we can respond by email. Disclaimer. You always have one of these in the presentation. The intention of this mini workshop is to spark and reignite the interest in creating or supporting the creation of OER with practical starting points. So we are not experts. However, from our experiences and from literature that research we've done for you, we are here to get you in the mindset to get started. So if it's a very technical question you might have, we might have the answer, but it might be one of those where we have to get back to you with the official answer. Now, for the first part of it, we're just going to do a quick recap of OER. OER is typically educational, freely accessible, and reusable. That's pre-standard definition idea of OER. Now, OER, you come into the concept of low cost versus OER. Oftentimes, faculty especially are confused about low cost versus OER. What is the difference? What is one better than the other? Is there benefits of both? Typically, low cost, the definition I found, is anything under $40. A textbook that's under $40 for a course would be considered low cost. Now, institutional-wise, that might be different. The cost might be slightly higher. It might be slightly lower. So traditional materials under $40, that's considered low cost. Library materials, believe it or not, even though faculty think that's considered OER, those are low cost because they cost the library money to typically get most of the time. OER is the stuff that is open access, you can easily get to, you don't have to pay money for. If you are paying for access to like a repository, like some of these companies have that have OER, but it has one location where it'll search for you, or you can search within, that is considered low cost then and not officially OER, even if you're looking up for OERs, if you use that type of service. Then we have Creative Commons. This is something that you have to think about because this is going to determine if how you can use the source you find. Just because something is OER doesn't mean that you can do anything you want with it. It depends on what rights you are given on how to use that material. The Creative Commons protects the creator's rights, encourages further creations. It offers different combinations of licenses, and this is going to determine what you can do and cannot do with that particular OER resource. You can license your own work, which is very important when you are creating OER. You can actually have a creative license established for that particular work. And I will add that link when Kristen starts talking. I'll add the link into the chat with the page for that. And then you can link to more Creative Commons information. You'll find more Creative Commons information in our links that we provide on the resource slides. We are, obviously this is a little more expansive, we're touching upon a lot of different things. I know Creative Commons is a very popular topic. Unfortunately, that would be a whole session onto its own. But we do provide information on that.
Okay, so I am going to talk about librarian roles that can exist for you in the OER universe, whether finding and locating OER, reusing it, remixing it, or authoring it. I'm going to point out tools that can be used for low tech, where it's mostly free, and more ease of use to use these tools. I'm also going to talk about mid-tech area of technology where it's not as hard to use, but not completely easy to use, and it might have some cost, and then high tech where there's a high learning curve and possibly some cost. And then I'm going to talk about ways that the difference between creating and publishing and then hosting your OER versus finding a repository to place your item in. Okay, so you can advance the slide. Thank you. So librarians are in a profession that we're already really good at sharing knowledge and expertise, and also really good at giving credit to the sources that we use. So we are already very good at the practice of sharing and Creative Commons like culture. And you're probably already creating OER content or OER-like content in your jobs if you use LibGuides. You always have the option of sharing your guide to the rest of the users on LibGuides. So you're already sharing that content. You're always sharing it conferences or in webinars. We're always collaborating and sharing our expertise. You probably put tutorials on YouTube for your library. So you're doing that there. A lot of libraries have created things and put them in Merlot or Oyster. I think I spelled that wrong. Is there an I in there as well? Oyster. So we've always been in the habit, before OER was even talked about, we've been sharing our instructional and library resources for many years. Okay, and I can include a link to Oyster when I update the slides. I saw that in the chat. Okay, so the other roles that you can have is you can support faculty and staff in creating, adapting, or remixing OER. I've actually had a nursing instructor reach out to me recently about wanting to adapt a medical terminology textbook. So I'm looking forward to working with her. You can collaborate with faculty and staff in creating, adapting, or remixing. So it's not just something for faculty to be doing. You can collaborate and support and be a part of creating OER at your institution. You obviously would be the best source, or one of the great sources at your campus, for helping faculty and staff locate sources of OER that can be remixed or adapted. As I heard recently from one of the creators of LibreText, he said the OER universe is fragmented because it's in a lot of different places. So learning how to find and locate good sources of OER is a very good asset for your campus, because it is in so many different places. You can support faculty in locating it, and then you can join the community of OER resources as a reviewer or a contributor. So you can locate OER and then ask if you can help edit and contribute to that content, or just review it using evaluation tools to review existing OER. And that helps faculty choose OER when you have reviewed it. You can advance the slide. Okay, so the low-tech options, and this is just in the creation side, but some of this does relate to the publishing or hosting side as well. But Google Docs, a lot of people get started with OER by creating something in Google Drive. You could use any of the Google software. We have an instructor here that created a writing textbook for English 1301 and 1302 using Google Drive. And so you can share that link to anybody and post it in different repositories. Obviously, Microsoft Word, you can use that to create documents, and it's easier to create an accessible document using Word than some other resources. And then you can collaborate with other authors using OneDrive or Teams. So most institutions use Word. Maybe some are just Google only, but you have access to that already. LibreOffice is the open source free access software that's similar to Word and all the other Microsoft tools. It's based on the original product of OpenOffice, but it's now LibreOffice from the Document Foundation. So they have a lot of software you can download. They did have a repository or like a cloud but it's currently frozen. I'm not sure why. So really LibreOffice would just be in the creation aspect as well. A lot of institutions have access to Adobe, and this is a great way to create documents that are accessible. It's not necessarily the best document format to share OER because it can't be well adapted, because once the PDF is created, it's harder to edit it. So if you do publish OER and you make PDFs, it's always good to have another version of the file for other remixers to adapt, depending on the license that you use. But it is a more readable format, and it is a good way to make accessible documents. We happen to have access to the Creative Cloud Adobe software here. I don't know if your institution does, but that gives you a lot of options to create pretty full-length documents using Adobe. And then OpenAuthor is from OER Commons. So this is a place where you can author and upload and host. So OpenAuthor is from OER Commons. They have an authoring platform. It's easy to use, and you can import other documents. And they have a great amount of tutorials on understanding how to use OpenAuthor. And if you find OER on OER Commons that was created using OpenAuthor, then it's easy for you to adapt or remix that directly in the platform. And all of these are free except for Word or Adobe Acrobat. Would not be free if your institution does not have access to it currently. Okay, next slide. So this is the mid-tech options. I kind of debated on Merlot. It's an open educational resources repository. It's kind of easy to use. So it could have been in the low-tech option. I kind of debated on that, but they have created a content builder. Now it's billed as a free website development tool. It's not for making textbooks, but you could make any sort of web-based item using Merlot Content Builder. So this is from California State Long Beach. Merlot has been around for a long time. It's the way that libraries have shared instructional content for a long time. So now they have this content builder, and it's really easy to use. You just create a Merlot account and then start getting started on creating. Okay, so LibreText is one of the highest providers of open educational resources in textbook format, but also they provide courses and learning objects. LibreText is supported by the Department of Education and the California Education Learning Lab. It is free and easy to use. You establish an instructor account so that you have access to the remixer. The one reason that I put it in the mid-tech versus low-tech was that it was hard to just figure out how to create the account and then to figure out how to get an instructor level access. So most of the difficulty was in the beginning, but once I got access to it, it was easy to use. You can only remix existing textbooks. You can't edit pages directly, but you can mix multiple sources of texts in LibreText and then adapt them and make a new book. And they have a lot of great webinars on YouTube and recordings on how to use LibreText. And it's sorted by different subject areas. So you pick your book, you pick the access you want to the subject area within LibreText, like there's medicine, biology, language arts. And then, and I see somebody said they agreed that it's mid-level LibreText. But once you establish your access, then you can pick the book you want to remix and use that. But yeah, I would watch some videos. And then Adobe Acrobat and Creative Cloud. Oh, I accidentally put it in both low and mid, sorry. But yeah, if you want to use a lot of the other Acrobat, the Adobe softwares to help you in creating your OER, then yeah, those would be a little bit more in depth to use, like if you wanted to create your own original images. Yeah, and there is a LibreNet membership as well. Okay, you can advance the slide. Okay, so these are high-tech options for people that just really, really want to learn a lot about creating very creative items. So Getbook is open source. It's an open source tool. It creates web-based items. It's used mainly for, it was developed in order to share within a team, sharing your documentation for software, sharing your management information. It's based for teams, but you can use that to create OER materials. It's free or low cost, so it's free to use. You can even publish it on the web. But if you want some more additional features, it's like restricting who has access to it and adding collaborators, then you would have to pay for Getbook. But it was very difficult, again, to create the account and figure out how to use it. I did start playing around with it. But again, it's not for creating a textbook, but more of like a course or a full-scale website. But you can collaborate with other people on that one. H5P is not an OER creation platform, but it's a way of creating reusable interactive objects that you can put within other things. So you don't even have to be putting it in OER. You could just put it directly into your learning management system. But LibreText has integrated H5P into their platform. So, and you can even find from other universities or colleges, different H5P tools they have created for their learning objects. So you could have polls or an interactive video or a survey or a drag and drop activity. So it's more interactive and it is low cost, but it's not free. You can get a free, oh yes, it's also in Pressbooks. You can get a free trial to it to use it, but then if you want to publish it or integrate it with anything, then you would have to get a membership. And then Pressbooks is got a free trial for 7 days, but it costs for larger scale creation and hosting. You can even then publish your Pressbook, but you would not be able to edit it after the 7-day trial unless you paid for it. And you wouldn't be allowed to provide an EPUB download for your readers. That also requires a subscription. And yes, SoftChalk is another tool that one of our instructors here does like, and it is cost-based. Okay, so now you've figured out how you want to create your OER, whether it's the low-tech or the high-tech method, but you need to provide access to it. And some people in the OER world don't think that it's necessarily a good idea just to have a Google Drive link because it's not like you're creating a readable format. You're sending them directly to your document. It's not like reading a book, but that's a good way of getting started. So you could host it on Google Drive. You could publish. So there's a difference between publishing to a repository and hosting it. So with a repository, you're really just letting them know that your item exists and they're listing it within their repository, and the repository will hold links to lots of different sources of OER, whether it's documents, test banks, or textbooks, or full courses, or lesson plans. The repository just is cataloging the open educational resources universe, and you can submit your item to be included in there, but that's not the same thing as hosting it. You still have to have a place to send those users to your OER. So that would be the hosting. So again, you can use a Google Drive, you can use LibGuides, and if your institution allows, you could even put a Creative Commons license on your LibGuides pages. I've seen people do that. You can put things in your learning management system, then you're just sharing them as OER to your particular institution. You can create a Google site and create a Google website and host your information there, and then include it in a repository. And then Getbook does allow you to publish your item as well, and then Pressbooks does as well if you do the 7-day trial. Repositories are like Merlot or OER Commons. OER Commons is a really great place to go to find OER, to list your OER, to create it. Your state might have an OER group within the OER Commons. Texas has one called OER Texas. So you could search and see if your institution, a neighboring institution, or your state has an OER group, or it's called a hub in OER Commons. And so you might have a repository at your state. So just search with your state name and OER or OER repository. So like Georgia has Galileo, Texas has OER Texas. If you know about the OER repository in your state, you can put it in the chat and we can share that. So if you do already know that one exists, that would be great to hear about. Okay.
So I'm going to actually, this slide is meant to kind of get you thinking. It's a lot of information we provided you, and I'm sure a lot of you are like, this is a lot. I'm going to slightly overload with the information, even though it's very excellent information and it will benefit you in the long run. But this is just a little checklist. I know as librarians, quite a few of us like to use checklists. So one of the things we wanted you to consider is when you are creating OER, is who is the audience? For example, I'm assuming since this is a community college level ACRL, that a lot of the people participating in the webinar are working at community colleges. Well, our students the demographic could be wide ranging. For instance, in my institution, we have high school students, all the way to students that are older, but they either are coming back to college and getting an associate's degree or they're getting a certificate. It's going to be different than if you were at a university and you have graduate students. So you need to think of the audience. And when you think of the audience, that's actually probably going to also determine what kind of tool you'll use and where how you want to present the information to the student. Like, how do you want to present the OER? Is it going to be a PDF or any other amazing tools that Kristen talked about? So this is something you have to consider. It kind of bleeds into one another. Also, when you're creating OER, actually not even really depending, but slightly depending on if you are taking existing work and you're revamping it, which again, that is a whole webinar on Creative Commons on how to revamp stuff and everything else. But educational framework of the OER. A lot of us prescribe, we might not even realize it, but we do kind of prescribe how we teach to a certain framework. Some examples are the Universal Design for Learning, which is UDL, or you have backwards course design. All different types of frameworks out there that you can use. And like, again, you might not even realize you're using one of them. It's just the way that either you were taught and that's the way you teach others, which I would have to say that's how I teach. I teach like I would want to be taught myself. But sometimes we have to take a step back. And when you do OER, if you want the students to get the most out of it, sometimes we do have to either get other people to look at it that you maybe teach a different direction or different method than us, so that we can make sure all students are able to get what they can get out of the OER. And that kind of leads to also the accessibility. And this is a very topical word for librarianship. Accessibility. Accessibility for everything is important. And this goes back also to the tools. When you are determining how you're going to create the OER, but also how you're going to have access to that OER, accessibility is very important because you want to make sure that every student is able to access that particular OER. And when you're creating even a document that's not even OER, You want to talk about images, you want to talk about tables, also videos and more. Again, videos, subtitles. But also it's alternative text. People don't think about this, but when you have a digital e-textbook, if you have a student that has an e-reader, they need to be able to read the book. If not, it's not going to be accessible to them. And you are going to have a population of your students that are not going to be able to use that OER like they could successfully. So you want to make sure, and there's actually, you can take a screen reader and you actually can have it read your screen. So if you ever are creating OER or have a faculty member that created OER, there is ways to where you can see how the screen readers would actually read the ebook. So that way, you know, if the e-reader can successfully navigate the OER that you are asking the students to use. And another thing is updating. We always talk about creation, like the beginning part, you know, how do we do it? What do we consider when we create it? But what do we do after? That's the big question. You know, what do we do? How often do we update this textbook? Do we actually say, okay, well, we're going to update it we're going to try to update it every 2 years or every 5 years or every year, which I will tell you probably every year, depending on the topic of the OER, is probably excessive. And who has the time to update every year? Also, who's going to be responsible for updating these textbooks? If you have an OER for a class, a specific class, and say that person retires, who's going to be, are you going to still use the OER because it's been successful? But who's going to be responsible for updating it? So that leads me also to, do you need policies in place for updating or even the creation of OER? It kind of goes, you know, hand in hand. Some institutions, I believe a lot of universities that do OER creation are really big focused on it. A lot of them do think about things like this. You know, who's going to be responsible for it? Where is it going to be? Where, you know, all those big questions that you want answers to. That is an institutional decision. That's not something where I can tell you, well, this is what you should do. This is what you should do. It depends on your needs. Every institution is different. And just within an institution, honestly, like for instance, I work in South Carolina. Different places in South Carolina have different needs, you know, different perspectives on this. Also, one of the things that you want to pay attention to also is when you're updating, not just who's responsible for it, but ultimately, even with the creation and updating, do people need approval before they actually use these in courses? Or are they just going to be allowed to use whatever they want to use? When in my previous institution, we actually had where if anybody wanted to introduce new technology into a class, they had to get approval from a faculty committee that was established for that. And just to kind of throw that thought out there and make you guys think, do we need that for OER as well? Do they need to have some kind of check system? So that way you're not having issues down the long run, especially with all the legal issues that books are having in libraries and academic institutions. So that's just something to think about. I'm not trying to overwhelm you at all with all that, but I just want to make sure that that's something that you're thinking about during the creation process. Now, the next couple slides are going to be resources that me and Kristen have found to be very important, but they're all very helpful too, to help you find answers maybe that we didn't answer here in the presentation, or perhaps later on you're like wondering, okay, I wonder about this. I want to get started. These particular resources are to help you get started. There are LibGuides from other institutions. So if you do see your LibGuide on here, thank you. But they are also text, actually OER text that actually, or books that actually will describe what we're describing. And some of them go more in depth about sources or tools. They also talk about more about checklists and what to consider. Some of them are a little bit, dated. They're not too dated, but they're not like current like this year. However, they still got very valuable information. Also, authoring accessibility. This is what Kristen and I were talking about. Kristen was talking about authoring, and I was talking about accessibility. These are a few links that we felt that might help you and under that topic to get you more information so you can have a little bit more understanding. Accessibility is definitely one of those ones where it's very technical. You have to, but there are very good resources out there to help you navigate that. Then one of the other important things, and I know me and Kristen talked about this, and we're like, we have to include a slide for conferences and trainings. This is the one thing I think sometimes can be very difficult to find if you're new to OER. If you're new to the topic that you are either in charge of all of a sudden, or you have limited experience. These are a few conferences and trainings that we recommend. I do highly recommend the Open Educational Conference. You do have to pay to attend, but if you are actually a student, then usually it's like $25, but it's really not that much even if you're not a student. So I do recommend these. These are also is the authoring again, but this is more the publishing tools as well. These are the links that Kristen was talking about when she was talking about the tools that you can use. There are links available and also slight description as well to get you started. And we have quite a bit of time for questions. If you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself or put in the chat a question that you might have.
Do you want to go over the questions that came up earlier in the chat before we were getting started?
Yeah, we can. Let's
Okay.
see. Let me
just to make sure I copied and pasted them into a Word document so I could find them.
Kristen is on it.
So I didn't put the name of the person, but somebody from Fort Collins just wanted to know about insights how other colleges organize OER efforts. This person mentioned that their OER champion left. And so a good flexible process people can follow when identifying OER and how to develop OER to fill the gaps.
Yes, from 12 to 1.
Oh. So that one, that's a good question. And that can look different at different colleges. Like we created our OER cohort and we're just trying to get faculty interested, and we're trying to even just get knowledge of who else is doing OER, because an instructor could be using it, but they just haven't shared it. So we've tried to develop ways that they can get recognition. Austin Community College is a great source. Sorry, I might be biased towards Texas because I'm from Texas and that's what I know about. But Austin Community College is good for ways to look at how they encourage OER and the process that they follow. They created an OER Heroes campaign, I believe, and instructors could get a champion or a hero designation when they used OER based on cost savings to students and how much OER they provided. We are planning a challenge in the fall for our faculty with some financial prizes to encourage people. So we're going to have awards based on how much OER is contributed by an individual or group, the best OER example. And I can't remember, there was quite a few and we were going to have them just post it to OER Texas or the OER Commons.
I know for where I work, we have where you can apply for like these special grants. For like if you want to try something in your classroom, either be like OER or some other things. They're like small grants you can get. We belong in South Carolina, we have a consortium with all the colleges, even some of the private colleges and universities in South Carolina. And sometimes they offer grants as well. But right now, as a big initiative or in my institution, we don't really necessarily have like a special like OER day or It's in the beginning stages. So my stage where I'm at is probably similar to a lot of you that are participating in the webinar today, where it's still new, but it's still been, OER has been around. It's just not a big push, a huge push.
Another thing that I've heard from other OER librarians, there's a really good example of community college OER librarians in El Paso and in the Valley. And they're both OER librarians. And what they do is they've gotten access to all of the course adoptions from the bookstore. And they've created a database to locate suitable OER replacements or alternatives for all the course adoptions that have occurred. And they have that at the ready, so instructors can search or they can reach out and find out if there's something else that they might be able to use. So that is a good way, even if you're not an OER librarian, you could maybe set aside some time to start finding out what is being used on your campus, getting access to those course adoptions. I'm sure that's available. And going ahead and starting to locate alternatives to the things that are already in use at your campus. And I'm not saying then all of a sudden email every faculty member and tell them you found them a replacement, but you've already got that information at the ready in case they ask. So that's one way to encourage that. And then there's a lot of good courses that can help people develop plans. The OER Commons had held a training before on how to encourage OER use at your campus and create a plan with your group. And you can actually find that on OER Texas or OER Commons, find the plans that other participants put in there and see what plans they developed. Let's see. Where are other community colleges storing their faculty published OER? And like I mentioned before, you want to, I mean, if you're sharing it just in-house with your institution, you would obviously use your LMS. That may not be considered really true OER though, because it's not available outside of your institution. So just using these other repositories that exist, rather than creating something new, finding the repositories that exist to publish these. But you would have to find a way of hosting them, and that might cost some money. But taking advantage of what's free to just get started, have your institution create an OER hub on OER Commons and get started that way. Somebody else asked about CC licenses, and I think we addressed that a little bit with the links. So I hope that was okay, but I did write down your name and I'll find your email and see if I can get some more specific information on the GFDL license versus CC license, if that's okay.
And for those that posted links, like Kristen had asked you guys to, what I'm doing is I'm trying to copy all those links so that way we can share those links with you guys. So if I miss one that you guys put down when we give them out to you, I apologize. I'm trying to catch all the links that you guys have sent about your states and everything, so that way everybody has access to them. I'm sure everybody's taking notes, but I just want to make sure that that's another way we can help you guys out, is sharing those links with you guys. Sorry, Kristen.
Oh, okay, that's okay. And that Nicole Carpenter asked, I'm trying to back up and make sure I don't miss any questions. Yes, the slides are in the recording. Thank you, Kathy, for sharing the link that I had provided. Nicole asked a timeline or flow or best practices for creating OER. I think if you use that backwards design or UDL as an idea, but the good thing to do first is identify what kind of material, what subject area of material you want to create, and then look and see first what exists that you might adapt. And if there's nothing for your area, then just get started with those low-tech options and kind of make an outline of, again, that backwards design. What do you want to accomplish with this? What audience do you want to share it with? What do you want to cover? Just like a traditional textbook would, identify what it aims to set forth in that book. But you could also get started with a smaller thing, like just an assignment or a smaller scale item, creating a lesson plan or a test bank or an activity. Get started with a small learning resource, and that would help you get started with OER rather than going full scale and creating a book. But I think one of the ways that's good is to start looking at OER that exists, and maybe experimenting with remixing existing content. And then the review rubrics that are in OER Commons on the authoring tool are kind of good to look at design considerations of how they have a rubric for evaluating OER that can help you with some design considerations.
One thing I do have to say that I would like to add to that is our math department is really big into using OER. Before I even started working in the institution I'm working at, they had already found OER that they were going to use. Now, there are 1 or 2 classes that they still have paid textbooks. But for them, a lot of the OER they found was stuff that's already like an OER Commons, already in places like that. There is one document that they have that actually isn't. It's one that they created themselves. In fact, it goes back to being someone that was retired and the person no longer lives there. So they actually decided this, it's actually a Word document that we PDF'd because that way the students can edit it. But what they decided to do with that is they have it on someone's SharePoint, which I do not recommend doing, but it has on their institution SharePoint account, and then we link it into a LibGuide. All the OERs for the math department the links are also available on the LibGuide. And that actually goes back to working with the faculty and making that another way that the textbooks are accessible to the students is not only through the LMS, but also through the LibGuide. So I highly recommend doing something like that. But for that particular document, it's one where when I started, they're like, oh, here's a link. And I'm like, I can't access it because I'm like, oh, that person retired. So from a little bit from experience, that's where definitely one of the things that Kristen was talking about, the repositories and where to store this, it comes into play. It's very important.
Yeah, so I was looking, somebody asked about career and technical OER resources. And that's what comes up a lot when we discuss this with faculty here is, especially in the health sciences. If you work with nursing at all, there was an excellent webinar series about a month and a half ago where OpenStax worked with some nursing faculty or retired nurses or current nurses to create, I believe it was 5 open nursing texts. It was aligned only with Texas nursing school, but it can be adapted to other institutions in other states, but they created the foundational nursing text through this large scale project that was funded by OpenStax and the Department of the Texas Education Administration. So that's something to look at, to look for those videos where they discuss the development of those nursing textbooks. But the career and technical OER resources, yes, that's probably a little bit harder to find than the regular traditional academic areas, but Skills Commons I found that's a good one. And it might be an area to collaborate with some technical faculty at your institution to develop something. And that's where the remixing can come into play. If you find resources from other academic resources, then you could remix something geared towards career and technical. But yeah, that is something that does come up, and there's a lot of different repositories to kind of try and find that. And I believe the Perkins grant had funded some projects for OER use in career and workforce education. Our institution had applied for it. I don't think that we got it, but looking for what projects exist from that Perkins grant would be a good idea.
Hi.
Hi, Sherry. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I've gone through all the questions in the chat, so.
Okay. And I think, you know, wherever you can start with the OER, look at some of the definitely look at the resources that we provided in the slides, especially the last few slides, the actual links that we provide. Look at those. And a lot of those, especially like I said, the books are going to help you figure out perhaps where to start. You know, where should I literally start with the process? And sometimes in your starting, if you can find one faculty member, especially if it's a big department, if you can find one faculty member that's on board to work with you on trying to get OER for their particular course, or just one of their courses, not all of them, just one, that goes a long way, because they can be a spokesperson or try to help you reach out to other faculty in the regard, like, it worked for them, it can possibly work for you. Am I going to say it's going to be perfect all the time? No, I've had requests for OER and it was the most obscure computer topic you could think of. But guess what? It took me 3 weeks, but I finally found an OER. But the key is you have to know your limits and also when to ask questions. Build up support system, either institutional wise or even state wise, or even, you know, ACRL committee wise. You know, people are out there and people are willing to help you. All you have to do is ask.
Yeah, so I see a lot of people talking about the hindrances or the problems they have at their institutions with equitable access and inclusive access. And I've often thought that OER was kind of looked at as a temporary solution until bookstores got their costs and in gear. So kind of like, oh, this is just our holding pattern until bookstores treat us better. But I don't think we need to necessarily see that OER has to take everything by storm, but we're a piece of the textbook affordability puzzle. And I think the OER is getting better and better, and the tools are going to get better and better. So just being part of the community as it's evolving is the best thing. And get started small. Your whole campus doesn't have to become OER. Although Odessa College has gotten a lot of, I think, no, Austin Community College and some other colleges have gotten a lot of, you know, recognition for 0 degrees. But I think we just do what we can with the stakeholders that really want to get involved in it. And it's going to grow. The quality is going to grow. The participators, the partners are going to grow. And just being involved is the best thing. And not worrying too much about how wide that adoption is, but get started, get knowledgeable, and you're gonna bring people along with you. One of the greatest speakers on OER she talks about OER joy, spreading OER joy, is Joanna Skimiski from ISKME, and ISKME is the collaborates or partners or is part of OER Commons. And if you can catch some of her webinars or trainings, she is so good at spreading OER joy. And we actually did a podcast with her here at our institution, and I'll share that on the ACRL community. And maybe not everybody here is with ACRL, so I can email it to the attendees. But we had a great podcast with her, which really helps get people excited about OER. And I think maybe our committee might try to do a podcast or interview with her next fall.
So what I'm going to do, I unshared my screen because I'm about to stop the recording, but we will stick around for a few moments in case people have more questions. But I actually included in the chat a link to, it says the recordings and slides for the 4 mini workshops will be emailed to participants and added to the ACRL YouTube channel, and it has the link for it. But and then it also has a link again to what we were talking about being a little bit more involved, if you can, and as a way to learn more. So at that, I'm going to stop the recording, but we're going to stick around to answer any other questions. So just give me one moment if you would, please.